Welcome in everybody to my first mock draft for the 2022 CFL draft. Really excited to get into it today. Really quickly before we get started, if you want to support the channel, as always, hit like and subscribe. Really appreciate it, everybody. And with that said, let's get right into it. So first off, I just want to say it seems like in comparison to last year when we didn't have like an in-person combine, we have a much better idea of what prospects are actually going to go near the top of this draft and where all these prospects slot in. So I'm very happy about that as a person that's trying to make this video. So with that said, let's start off with number one, when the Edmonton Elks own the number one pick. And I think this one seems like it's the obvious no-brainer at this point, and that is linebacker Tyrell Richards out of Syracuse. Richards is a really versatile athlete. He really put that on display at the combine, working out with the defensive linemen, the linebackers, and even taking a few reps at defensive back. Really good coverage ability, blitz ability, pass rush moves, you name it. And I'm really excited to see if this is in fact the pick, how Chris Jones, head coach of the Edmonton Elks, uses him in his defense. At number two, I have the Ottawa Redblacks taking wide receiver Tyson Philpot out of the University of Calgary. So a lot of people have Jalen Philpot, the other Philpot brother, going here at number two to the Ottawa Redblacks. But I think ultimately what Ottawa is going to do, and I think they are going to take a receiver at this spot, is they're looking for the highest upside guy. And Tyson admittedly even said this when they were talking about differences between the two brothers. He said that he's the guy that likes the long ball a lot more, and I think that's what Ottawa is going to really try to create with this pick, and they want a higher upside guy like I mentioned. So I think Tyson, being the slightly better athlete, ran a slightly better 40 time, created a lot more explosive plays the last season in 2021 than Jalen, even though Jalen did lead the team in receptions. I think this is the pick for Ottawa, although I feel like it could go either way. Now at number three, I have the BC Lions taking wide receiver Jalen Philpot out of Calgary. This is probably not what I would do if I were them. I would try to get offensive line help, but ultimately I think this is not the strongest offensive line class either, so it's really hard to justify taking a offensive lineman this high in this particular draft. So they take Jalen Philpot. The Philpot brothers are from BC, so I think it's a slam dunk in terms of the marketing, what they're trying to build in terms of the image of that team, although that offensive line is still looking like a disaster, and this doesn't really help matters in that respect. At number four, I have the Montreal Alouettes taking defensive back Enock Makonzo out of Coastal Carolina. Makonzo's a guy that I haven't really talked about in my previous videos covering this draft, mostly because his status was kind of up in the air. I think in terms of talent, he's right up there in terms of being perhaps the best player in this draft. But there are questions about him entering the transfer portal, but we ultimately got word about this week when he said he is not going to be returning to school. So this is a big boost to his draft stock, and I think with his brother in Montreal already, I think this is a slam dunk pick for the Alouettes. And I think developing a guy behind linebacker Chris Aki and defensive back Marc-Antoine Dequoy, perhaps he even starts over Dequoy eventually at safety, being a great athlete. I think he's an easy pick here for the Alouettes. At number five, I have the Calgary Stampeders taking defensive lineman Deionte Knight out of Western. Knight was a guy that was projected early on in the process as a favorite to go number one overall, but now with the consensus building that Richards is going to be the number one overall pick to Edmonton, I really don't see him going before number five to Calgary, and Calgary would love this because they are potentially going to start two Canadian defensive linemen, and they need a guy that can be versatile, play inside and out. You have Derek Wiggins starting on the inside, and then potentially Isaac Adeboboye starting on the edge. And you need a guy that can play inside and out, and Knight is absolutely the prototype to do that. And I think potentially with a guy that in Knight that was viewed as potentially the best player in this draft class when we were early on in this process, I think this could be a big steal for Calgary if he falls to number five. At number six, the Toronto Argonauts have this pick, and I have them selecting defensive back Tre Ford out of Waterloo. I think, if he gets signed down in the NFL as an undrafted free agent, I think it's going to be really interesting to see how it affects his draft stock, if there's a team that's still willing to take him this high. But for now, with the uncertainty of not knowing that for sure he's going to get an undrafted contract down south, I think that taking him in the first round is still a decent bet. I think that being one of the best athletes in this class, running the fastest 40 at the CFL Combine this past month, I'm really interested to see how Ford does. And Toronto really doesn't have any glaring needs on this roster from a Canadian perspective, as I discussed in my Canadian talent video the other week. And I think they're in the position to really take the best player available, and Tyrell Ford, for me, is by far the best player available. At number 7, I have the Saskatchewan Roughriders taking offensive lineman Noah Zerr out of the University of Saskatchewan. And this is the slam dunk pick that everybody's going to be mocking because Saskatchewan needs offensive line help. Zerr is probably the best offensive lineman in this draft class. I could see him going a little bit earlier, potentially, because he is the best offensive lineman in this draft class, in my opinion. And I think he has the versatility to play tackle as well at the next level, which is really going to appeal to Saskatchewan. And I think if the Riders have the opportunity to take him, I think this is probably for sure the pick for them. I mean, they do have other needs as well on the defensive line, but I think offensive line is more of a glaring issue for them, and Zerr is a great fit to plug right there in that hole. Now, speaking of offensive linemen, at number 8, I have the Hamilton Tiger Cats taking offensive lineman Zach Pelehos out of the University of Ottawa. And Pelehos is one guy that really impressed me at the CFL Combine. It's a little bit lighter of a guy, but he has good length in terms of his arm length and moves very well. And for that reason, I see him as more of a tackle prospect at the next level, as a developmental prospect at that tackle position. And that's perfect for Hamilton because, you know, Chris Van Zyl, as I discussed in my needs video last week, they really need to start developing a plan B for when Van Zyl actually does retire. So, you know, with Van Zyl at 38 years old, it could happen anytime, and they really need to start developing that right tackle prospect for the future. And Pelehos, I think he's as good of an option to do that in this draft, and I think he's worthy of the number 8 pick here. Now, with the final pick in the first round, I have the Winnipeg Blue Bombers taking, at number 9, defensive lineman Nathan Cherry out of the University of Saskatchewan. Now, Cherry is obviously a candidate to go at number 7 to the Saskatchewan Roughriders because they have a need at defensive line as well, like I mentioned. But I think if he's available to Winnipeg at number 9, I think they take him because he is an ideal guy in this draft class to potentially develop behind defensive tackle Jake Thomas. A lot of these other defensive linemen in this draft class are edge prospects, and they were talking about that a lot on the CFL.ca live stream at the Combine. And Cherry is a guy that projects more as an interior guy at the next level. Really good bull rush, really good quickness, change of direction quickness for his size. And I think he's an ideal guy to, you know, rotate along that defensive line as Jake Thomas gets older or potentially walks away in a few years. Now, I did make a mock for the second round, but I'm going to go a little bit less in detail here, just going to speed up the process here. So at number 10, the Toronto Argonauts actually own this pick via the trade with Nick Arbuckle. I have them selecting running back Daniel Adeboboye out of Bryant, and I totally butchered his name just there. I'm going to start practicing how to say his name for drafted because I think Adeboboye is going to go pretty high in this draft class. He had the most bench reps of any player at the CFL Combine, which is ridiculously impressive for a running back. He looked really good in the pass protection aspect of the one-on-one drills, and that's really what's going to appeal to him to teams because there's a lot of guys that, you know, have that athleticism to play running back at the CFL level, but not all of them have that polished pass protection aspect that is super important at the CFL level, considering how much teams throw the ball. And I think with Toronto, they need a backup running back to Canadian running back Andrew Harris. And I think that's, you know, Adeboboye is actually a really good option to fill that here in the second round. At number 11, I have the Red Blacks taking defensive lineman Josh Archibald out of McGill. Ottawa is another one of those teams looking at potentially starting 2 Canadians on the defensive line. Archibald really impressed me at the Combine. Honestly, I think I could see him sneaking into the first round, but I think Ottawa, if he's there, this is a really good fit. At number 12, I have the BC Lions taking offensive lineman Gregor MacKellar out of STFX. And MacKellar, another really strong performance at the Combine, especially in the one-on-one segment. I don't think he's really going to be a guy that wows you with his athleticism, but he has a really good, strong base, you know, good feet. And he just kind of locks on to guys, really a guard prospect at the next level. But as I mentioned in my video the other day, BC needs any kind of offensive line help at this point, and I think MacKellar has a chance to be maybe the second or third best offensive lineman in this draft class. And then at number 13, we have a little bit of a run on offensive linemen here. I have the Montreal Alouettes taking offensive lineman Cyrille Hogan-Saindon out of Laval. I think this is the classic Danny Machocha pick, the GM of the Montreal Alouettes, who coached with the Montreal Carabins in the Quebec Youth Sports Conference. And I think he's going to take the best Quebec Youth Sports prospect available here. And Hogan-Saindon is a fast riser in this draft class, looked very good in terms of his movement skills. I believe he had a really good 3-cone time in this year's combine. So I've noted that they need to develop more young offensive line pieces. So I think this is a good fit for Montreal. And then at number 14, I have the Calgary Stampeders taking offensive lineman Peter Kozushka out of the University of Alberta. And again, we have a little bit of offensive linemen going back to back here. And I think this is kind of the sweet spot to take offensive linemen in the draft class. Usually you see 3, 4, 5 of them go in the first round alone. But this year, I really don't think it's going to happen that early. I think in the second round is going to be where you see a run on offensive linemen. And Kozushka, he didn't completely wow me at the combine, but watching a little bit of him, he seems like a guy that has the versatility to potentially play inside and out on the offensive line. And Calgary with this spot, I think they're looking more for a sixth man kind of type that can slot in at multiple spots. And I think, taking him away from Edmonton, who might be looking to take him as well, is a smart move here for Calgary. And then at number 15, I have the pick that people are probably wondering about when they clicked on this video, and that's quarterback Tre Ford out of Waterloo. And I think Toronto's just a perfect fit for him because they don't have any really glaring needs. They don't really have many appealing backup options at quarterback. You have Antonio Pipkin, you have Chad Kelly there. We'll see if any of that really materializes into anything. And you have kind of a questionable starter in McLeod-Bethel-Thompson in terms of the long-term solution there. So I think Tre Ford is a really good gamble here in the second round, especially considering Toronto has 2 second-round picks as well. And then at number 16, I have the Saskatchewan Roughriders taking defensive lineman Riley Pickett out of Saskatchewan. Like I mentioned before, I think it's possible that Saskatchewan takes the other defensive lineman from Saskatchewan, Nathan Cherry, in the first round. But I think if they don't, Pickett will be here at number 16. And then at number 17, I have the Hamilton Tiger-Cats taking wide receiver Kiondre Smith out of Guelph. I think Hamilton's not done adding to this wide receiver core. I think they want a little bit more size from this unit. They have a couple really undersized receivers in Tyler Chernowski and David Unger on the roster. And with Lamar Durant, I think he is going to be one of their clear starters, but I think that they're looking at starting 2 Canadians, and I don't think they want to go to camp with just those 3 guys. So I think they're going to add a guy that's a very proven guy at the U Sports level in Smith. And then at number 18, I have the Winnipeg Blue Bombers taking offensive lineman Zack Fry out of Western. Winnipeg is a team that has 3 good starters in terms of Canadian guys on the offensive line, but I think they could really use another guy to really develop behind those guys as a potential swingman. Fry is a potential guy as a tackle at the next level, played that basically exclusively in college. He's a guy that did not have a great combine performance. I think he only put up 9 reps on the bench press, which everybody was pointing to, but I think he's going to slide a little bit on draft day. I don't know if he slides this far. He was a guy that people had potentially mocked in the first round, but we'll see what happens with Fry. If he's available by this point, I think he's a good value add for Winnipeg. Now, finally, we have the 2 territorial picks at the end of the second round, starting with Edmonton at number 19. I have them taking offensive lineman Rodeem Brown out of Alberta. And Brown's a guy that really impressed me at the CFL Combine. I thought he was arguably the best offensive lineman there. But apparently he's going back to school, which hurt his draft stock ultimately. And if he falls to number 19 here at the territorial selection, I don't see many other better options for them. And then at number 20, I have the Ottawa Redblacks taking defensive lineman Anthony Federico at Queens. I thought he looked pretty good at the Combine as well. He could end up going a little bit earlier, but if he drops to number 20, I could definitely see him being picked by Ottawa as he fits their territorial selection criteria. But with that said, that is going to be the end of my first mock draft for the 2022 CFL Draft. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. If you enjoyed, be sure to hit like and subscribe and let me know what you think down below in the comment section. And with that said, I think I'm going to be doing another one of these after the NFL draft because we'll have a better idea of where these prospects, if they're going to be signing down south. I think it's going to be important to update that. So I'm going to try to get a mock draft out between the NFL draft and the CFL draft, which again, I'm going to be doing a live stream May 3rd. So be sure to tune into that, guys. I really appreciate all the support. And with that said, hope everyone has a great day. Peace.